allegiance, please, and please join me.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, I will call the special City Council meeting of Tuesday, January 27th to order. Mrs. Vach, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rold?
Here.
Ms. Graves?
Here.
Mrs. Turner?
Here.
Mr. Kramer?
Here.
Mayor Winger?
Here. As I am going to give only a short introduction, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, different than normal City Council. There are two matters which I'll let the two gentlemen sitting in front of me detail, but one is an impasse proceeding between the City of Vero Beach and Teamsters Local Union number 769 Blue Collar, and the other one is quasi-judicial hearing impasse proceeding City of Vero Beach and Teamsters Local Union 769 Technical and Clerical. With that, I have a question procedurally. Are we going to do these each separately, or do you want to put them together? I asked the two of you, Steve and Jason. Doesn't matter.
I have no objection if we do them together, as long as the city doesn't.
So we'll do them together then. All right. With that said, anyone who's no public comment is allowed, except witnesses are allowed if called by each of the respective gentlemen in front of me. So, Jason or Steve, if you have witnesses, we need to swear them in, please.
We don't make public comment at the beginning of this meeting? We
No.
cannot have a public meeting without allowing for public comment? Isn't that a requirement?
I don't have it on the agenda, so if you're correct, it'll be okay.
There is public comment on there.
Okay.
Before the proceedings.
Not for
Okay, before the proceedings, but we still have to do the witnesses. So do you have a witness, Jason?
Just for the union, the union's position is there should not be public comment. Not that I'm opposed to public comment, but it's not appropriate in this hearing.
I believe this is Jason, just for the record. We addressed this last time. I believe in a quasi-judicial hearing, there's no public comment on this hearing in terms of what the council is going to hear and the decision it's going to make. There's no public comment, I believe, in any quasi-judicial hearing.
No, quasi-judicial is exempted, but if you want to have general public comment, that's your choice. It's not required.
Okay.
With that said, what's the pleasure of the council? The sheet I'm reading says there's no public comment, but the council, of course, can change that. I have no opinion. I do not care.
If I may, is there a possibility that public comment would somehow corrupt the process if certain things were said that was...
Quasi-judicial is exempted from that recently enacted law that says the public is allowed input into any matters that council is going to make a decision on. That's one of the few exceptions, and this is quasi-judicial. It only involves the city and the unions, those two parties in each case.
Being that it's quasi-judicial, if they speak on the matter, should they be sworn in?
Yes. Well, not the representatives. They can...
But I mean the people for public comment.
But you shouldn't take public comment unless they're called as a witness.
Okay, my question is, if you're going to do public comment, should you be sworn in, being that you are going to be talking about an ex parte process?
No. Someone can't just come up on their own in a quasi-judicial. They have to be called as a witness.
Well, that's what we're getting ready to do, is have people come up on their own in public comment.
Well, unfortunately, that was put on the agenda, public comment, but it isn't necessarily the case that you have to take it, not in this case.
Well, I would say that we should do what the two representatives say in front of us and not have public comment. They may call any witness they would like, and if they call witnesses later on, they can certainly be sworn in. But I'll make a motion to that effect and either get a second, or if I don't get a second, I'll call public comment. I don't care.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, 4-1. The next thing, there being no witnesses, we have to ask for ex parte communications. Council members should disclose any ex parte communication that may have occurred subsequent to January 27th, 2014, with the exception of any prior executive session with legal counsel and the bargaining team. e.g. discussions with the parties, communications received. Any effective party may ask questions of a council member about such communications. The questions will be directed by the mayor. And I will say I was contacted by Brian Collier about 6 months ago, and I don't remember the substance of it, but he did contact me on the subject, so I reveal that.
Just a little clarification, it would be communications after the city filed its rejection of the special magistrate's recommendation.
Right. Do you have that date, Jason?
I'm going to give it to you right now.
Okay, Jason, excuse me, I'm reading off what's in front of me. So it would have been before that date.
December 5th, 2014.
Yes, it was before that date.
Very
It would have
well.
been last summer, I believe.
Very well.
Any other council member?
I had a discussion with the finance director just about the numbers. No opinions given, just some questions asked about the numbers.
All right, then I think we'll move on to number 2, which is the management position. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is, and Jason Odom will be speaking for us.
Okay, Mr. Odom, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Just to kind of give a little bit of background of how we got here, as the council knows, the city is party to 2 collective bargaining agreements with the Teamsters Union, one for what we call the blue-collar unit, the second for what we call the clerical and technical unit. Those are 2 separate units with 2 separate collective bargaining agreements. Both of those agreements expired in 2013, and the city union began negotiations toward a successor agreement. As the council may recall, in 2014, you resolved an impasse that we had as to wages, and that resolution was with a 3% wage increase across the board for employees in the Teamsters units, both units. After that, the parties resumed negotiations for a successor agreement. Mr. Myers, myself, and our respective bargaining teams engaged in those negotiations in 2014. We reached an agreement on all articles except for the ones before you in your packet. And before I go too far, does everybody have a copy of what the city manager put out? Okay. It would be just with the city's recommendations along with the report from the special magistrate and along with a copy of the city's position, which is like a red line type agreement strike through for both impasse articles on the blue collar unit and for the clerical and technical unit. Those articles, just for your edification, are Article 10, which is the article on layoff and recall, Article 15, which covers annual leave, Article 17, which covers other forms of paid leave, i.e. sick leave, Article 19, which is the holiday article, 20, which covers wages, 23, which is health insurance, and Article 24, which is retirement benefits. Those are the articles that the parties were at impasse on. The city presented those articles as a package proposal, which essentially meant that the entire package had to be accepted or it was rejected. The parties went through the impasse process by having a special magistrate appointed. That individual, we held a hearing, that individual issued a recommended decision, which you have as part of one of the exhibits to the city manager's report that was provided to you. There are, as you'll see in that report, some differences between the city's position and the union's position, and then in some cases even the special magistrate's recommendation on certain articles. For other articles, for example, Article 10, there is not a dispute. The special magistrate recommended adoption of the city's, and the union takes no issue with that. As the council may know as well, under Florida Statute 447-403, it's now your job to decide those articles at impasse by taking the public interest, including the interest of the public employees, and making your decision as to how you're going to resolve those articles. So I think the best way probably to handle it is to go one by one. That would be my preference, at least. I can give my position on each article. Mr. Myers can give his position in response to that article, and then council can address it and make a decision. I think, in my view, that would be easier than me giving my position on every single article, Mr. Myers doing the same, and then council parsing through that to make his decision. So unless somebody has an issue with that, I'll go ahead and start. We
should probably let Mr. Meyer, if he has any initial comments or objections to your proposal comment at this time?
Thank you, Mayor, Council members. My name is Steve Myers. I'm business agent with Teamsters Local 769, representing the blue-collar employees and the clerical technical employees before you here today. I'm not going to go through the background. Jason, described the articles at impasse pretty good. The only difference is that there were three of the Articles 10, 17, and 23, in which the union did not dispute any of the proposals that were made by the city with respect to these articles, but yet the city still took these issues to impasse because it was not a part of a final package. So with respect to Articles 10, 17, and 23, the union's position was to accept those proposals that were made from the city at the very onset of the negotiation process. So we don't believe those issues should have been before the special magistrate. Nevertheless, they were. And we're still willing to accept the proposals as were put forward by the city and recommended by the special magistrate. The union, obviously, going into the impasse with the city, had different positions, but after going before the special magistrate, which was a neutral that both parties agreed to going into the process, the union made the decision to accept the special magistrate's recommendation in its entirety. We could sit back and cherry pick each article. That's not something we elected to do. We elected to, both parties agreed to a special magistrate, both parties agreed to the special magistrate that we used, and we believe that it's only fair to the employees and it's only fair to the city that we give some type of merit to the recommendations that the special magistrate put forward. So although we're not entirely thrilled with every single thing that's in the magistrate's recommendation, our recommendations today and our position today before you is that of the special magistrate in its entirety.
All right, Mr.
Okay.
Odom.
Article 10 was the first article, and Article 10 is the article that addresses layoff, recall, and the city's position was recommended for adoption by the special magistrate. The union's position was union takes no issue with that article, so I think that would be an easy one for the council to take. There's not an issue that you need to decide.
Are we required, Mr. Comet, to vote on each article, or only the ones that are contested?
I would think it's
Each article.
whatever the parties agreed to.
Well, I think you can either vote on each article or at one time vote on everything in its entirety, but at some point it has to be voted on.
All right, well, I'll take a motion on Article 10 to accept.
Can we just do 23 while we're at it, too?
10, 17, and 23.
Yeah.
Are the three
Well, Article
articles.
10,
do it in
17,
mass,
and
that's
23,
fine. Go
the
ahead.
special magistrate recommended adoption of the city's position. The union, as you heard, does not take issue with the special magistrate's recommendation. So those three, in my view, I don't know that you're certainly welcome to comment upon the individual articles, but a motion on each of those would be fine, joint or collective motion.
Motion to accept 10, 17, and 23.
Second.
Of this, okay. You
All right.
clear of the city's position.
That will require a roll call. Mrs. Vach?
Mr. Rold,
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes. Proceed, Mr. Odom.
The next article that I would discuss would be Article 15. Article 15 is the provision on annual leave. And in your packet from the city manager is the red-lined agreement. Unless yours is not in color, then it'll be the black-lined agreement. And it will you'll be to see what's underlined is what's been added, and of course what's been struck through has been changed. You may recall it's been loosely referred to as use it or lose it. But the annual leave policy in front of you mirrors in large part the annual leave policy that is in place for the non-bargaining unit employees. The specific bone of contention between the parties is in year one of the contract as to how many days would be advanced. Keep in mind that those annual leave hours on the books would be deemed frozen. However, any employee is allowed to use those hours. In the frozen bank, you simply cannot add to those hours. So the question is, in year one, how many days would the city advance? The city's recommendation was to advance 5 days of annual leave. It's the same number of days that the city advanced to rank and file police officers. And one thing I want to bring to your attention is that, being a payroll issue as well, if you advance the days and the person uses those days and then leaves before they've accrued it, you can't take it back. So that was one of the considerations, at least by a payroll, with respect to that provision. The union's recommendation was 15 days in year one of the contract. As you can see in the report by the special magistrate, he recommended adoption of the city's position on the 15, except for the number of days advanced in year one, and put it at 15.
Mr. Oldham, a question for you. This is year one time, or year one every time there's a new contract, please?
This would be year one of going into this freezing the account.
Mr. Meyer, your comment, please.
Annual leave account.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, again, the 15 days was the union's proposal that was adopted by the special magistrate. With the rest of the entire Article 15, the union had no objection to moving towards what the city was proposing with respect to the annual leave. As was indicated, the 15 days is just for the first year of the agreement. There's other bargaining units. So I think there's a police bargaining unit. I think they're allowed to have all of their annual leave up front, and somehow, finance is able to, figure out how to make that happen. So I don't think it's going to be a problem for finance. They're pretty smart people over there to figure out how to make the 15 days happen.
I think we open it to questions of the council, of the two advocates here, please. Anyone have questions or comments? Mrs. Turner, you're recognized.
I would just certainly object to going to 15. You already have 2 weeks vacation. You advance another 15 days. It's 3 weeks. So you've got employees out for 5 weeks. Needless to say, this is going to put a burden on the administration and trying to backfill those positions for that length of time. I think advancing 5 days is reasonable. This whole thing came through with, an excessively generous and policy that had been abused, that we need to get to use it or lose it. It's good for employees to take their vacations, and I say we accept the city's position.
Are there further comments by council?
Just as a curiosity, Jason, you mentioned a little bit about the other unions, the police union. One of the things that gets to be a problem with us is when we have this disjoint between the different contracts. Now, the police department, are they on the 5 days annual leave?
The police department rank and file, so your sergeants and below, are on the 5 day. What Mr. Myers was referring to, I'm pretty certain, is the lieutenant's agreement, which is, as he stated, however, the lieutenants are exempt employees. They are not paid overtime. And so there are, to your point, yes, there are concessions made. It's very difficult to parse out one particular article and say, why did you do that in this particular contract versus what you did in a different contract. There are just a lot of variables there, but the rank and file is 5, lieutenants are 20. A very important distinguishing point is that the lieutenants are exempt employees. So that's in my mind, a very important distinction.
Mr. Myers, comment?
Well, keep in mind the union, notwithstanding Article 15.09 that deals with the number of days that the employees will receive up front, this is a concessionary proposal for the union to accept. We're moving to an entirely different type of use it or lose it position. So, consider our position in the entire context of the article, not just that we're trying to ask for days up front as employees are beginning a new bank, that somebody may have a vacation or something they want to use. This isn't time that the city's going to lose any money on. And it's already, the lieutenant's language is real clear in there, as the employees will receive on the employee's anniversary date in advance of all annual leave. So, if they get 5 weeks, they get all 5 weeks up front every year of the contract, not just the first year.
Further comment by council?
What if we were to cut it down the middle, like to 10 days?
I think at 10 days, Councilmember Graves, you're still going to be in that situation where if the person takes those 10 days, you cannot withhold somebody's entire paycheck, at least in staying in compliance with the Fair Labor Standards Act. So that's one of the chief concerns, at least, of payroll, is that when that happens, there's not really a vehicle for the city to go back and kind of recover that advancement, if you will, of the leave time. I'm not aware of it being an issue in the police department for rank and file officers in terms of the 5-day advancement. They're now in what, year 2, Mr. O'Connor, of that?
That is correct.
And it did not come up in my discussions with the PBA, because they're getting ready to open their contract up on the whole, I believe, in May of this year. So,
But it's also important to note, you can still take out of your frozen bank day one. The frozen bank is still open for any employee to use out of their frozen bank if they choose to do so.
I don't understand frozen bank.
What we're talking about in this contract, whatever accumulation of days that you have goes into a bank and it stays there. If you retire 2 years later, you get credit for those days earned. But you cannot add to that bank going forward. You have to use the vacation you are allocated under the contract the next going year. And so the theory is that you have that leave bank that you can call upon at any time. For example, if you have medical emergencies or whatever, your leave bank is still available for you to use.
Thank you.
Mr. Myers, you've made a point that either way it wouldn't cost the city any difference in money. Could you explain that?
Well, I mean, whether the person accrues the time over the duration of that year or you give it to them in advance, it's not going to cost the city at the end of the fiscal year one dime more.
Unless they leave the city employee and you have no way to recover those costs.
How often have we experienced that?
We haven't, because we haven't had it in place.
Well, it would be no different than advancing 5 days, so you've had that in place. So how often then has that, employee left where you couldn't get 5 days back from them?
Just for clarification, we're talking about paid days.
Talking about paid days, that's correct. But they're going to accrue those days within that 1 year period anyway. It's just for that, the startup of transitioning from the current system to the take it or lose it system, to where the employees are on a new type of annual leave accrual, to where if somebody wants to take an annual leave, they don't have to use it from their frozen bank. They can have the time in advance.
And those employees with short terms of service that would normally be awarded 15 days of vacation would automatically get 15 days that first year. Is that correct? Under this plan?
On day one.
Yeah, on day one. So usually you would have to work 5 years to get 15 days of vacation, and now all of a sudden you're going to get it right away.
The real intent behind it was it was a concession by the city to advance days in year one, because as Mr. O'Connor said, you can use the frozen bank. It's frozen to the extent that you can't add to it. It's thawed if you want to take it out. So it was meant to say, okay, listen, we're going to freeze that bank, meaning you can't add to it, meaning it would affect when you retire or leave the city, the payout. And I think the council probably recalls how this came into being in the first place. So it was a concession on the city's part to say, okay, look, in consideration of the fact that we're freezing that account, we'll go ahead and advance you 5 days up front so that you don't have to take it out of your frozen, meaning you can keep those 5 days there. They'll be calculated for payout. So in terms of, does it mean somebody can't take a vacation? Can they not get their full allotment of leave? The answer is clearly no. It's just that we the city agreed to advance 5 days so they wouldn't have to take it from the frozen leave account. I mean, that's really the bottom line on how it came into being.
So correct me if I'm wrong. If the employee stays employed for the first year, this clause really doesn't matter. I mean, they're going to have their days already. So this really only applies as if somebody decides to leave employment during that first year.
That's correct.
Mr. O'Connor, do you have any comment?
No, sir. Other than what Mr. Odom has put forward, the risk is if somebody took 15 days and comes back to work and hands you the termination notice, you will not be able to recover those days from that paycheck.
How bad a problem is the payroll?
Well, one of the concerns that we have is trying to divide up, 300 employees by different ways that we're giving calculations of time that you would take at the beginning of the year. It just becomes it's a manual issue.
Further
This
questions?
is on their anniversary date, remember, that's what we're doing here, not on the fiscal year.
Further questions, further comment?
I move to move forward with the city's position.
Is there a second? Seeing no second, is there another proposal?
The only thing I see here is that, we're just trying to protect ourselves from a disgruntled employee that just wants to take the days and run, which I could actually see happening. I don't have a problem splitting it down the middle. I'll make a motion to change Article 15 to 10 days.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I'll call the motion, Mrs. Bach.
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
No.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
Just for clarification, that is only in year one.
Only in year one. Year one happens only one time, not with every contract.
Correct.
Okay?
Okay. Moving to the next article will be Article number 19. Number 19 is the article on holidays. And the city's proposal was the elimination of one holiday, that holiday being Good Friday. The second proposal from the city was to pay holiday pay for 1 day for each employee. However, we are going to eliminate what's known as the substitute holiday. The council, you may recall this from the rank and file contract we addressed at the police department, whereby if an employee is off or doesn't work the actual day of the holiday, let's just make it Christmas Day to make it easy here, the next work day would be deemed that holiday by which the employee would be paid double time. So the city's proposal is that holiday pay will stay, but only those employees who actually work the day of the holiday would be paid time and a half for working the actual day of the holiday. So we would eliminate Good Friday as a holiday, and we would pay holiday pay, but the extra pay would only go to those employees who actually work the day of the holiday. It is the same formula, if you will, for holiday pay that is used in the police department for rank and file. The special magistrate's position was to adopt the city's position as to Part 2, which is how you pay for a holiday, but to keep Good Friday as a holiday.
Would it be satisfactory with you, Mr. Odom, and you, Mr. Meyer, if we dealt with the two issues independently? I'm having trouble with dealing with them.
It's your pleasure, Mr. Mayor. They are two separate issues.
Yes.
How did we determine, from what I understand, the average number of holidays or paid holidays at the county is 10. I think that's pretty much the norm. We currently have 11 paid holidays. Is that correct, Mr. Odom?
I believe the county has 11, but I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% sure. I'm very intimately familiar with how the city handled it with the police department and how you may be questioning why is it a different holiday with the Teamsters versus the police department. We deferred to the police department in terms of, or their management in terms of, which holidays would it be more of a manpower burden to deal with versus, certain holidays generate more police work than other holidays, and that's how that came to be in the police department. It wasn't as big of a concern in the Teamsters unit as to how we came to Good Friday. Keep in mind, the police department lost 2 holidays, albeit they were given a compensatory day for their birthday.
How many holidays do they have?
It would be the same. Well, actually, it'd be one less. So what? 9 would be. Let me add it up for you. So for the police department, it would be. Nine.
And that includes the birthday?
This is part of the horse trading that goes on in collective bargaining, Ms. Craig. But they have 9 paid holidays, but they get a compensatory day for their birthday.
So they have 10 days.
So-
Mr. Meyer?
So I guess
Pseudo 10 days.
Yes, and that's kind of how we got to with the Teamsters unit only losing 1 holiday, but they do not get a compensatory day. So
I think it's important, to get to a reasonable number of paid holidays. I mean, obviously, in the business world, I would see maybe 8 as paid holidays. So here we are at 11. And we boosted up to 11. Kept getting more holidays as the economy and things was good. I would like to see us get down to 10 across the board. And to me, it doesn't matter whether they take Good Friday or they take Martin Luther King Day, whatever day they want. I mean, it doesn't make any difference. But as long as we have the same number of paid holidays and that we're consistent. And as far as the substitute holiday pay, I mean, I think that's absurd. That should have never existed.
Let's go to that bit, but we haven't allowed Mr. Meyer to speak. Please come forward, sir.
Well, 2 points. One, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, and I think, being a neutral as you're listening to the positions of both parties is important, and not to take a position without hearing from both sides first. I think that's very important. So I'd allow me to present our position. The city has had 11 holidays for years. This is not something that just happened 5 years ago. It's been in place for many years now. The current non-bargaining employees and management employees receive 11 paid holidays. And what the police union did with whatever Jason wants to refer to it as horse trading, and if they want to trade their birthday for, Good Friday, so be it. That's just not something this bargaining unit gave me direction to do. It's an important holiday, Good Friday, to them, and it's just not something that this bargaining is willing to sacrifice. So, the special magistrate, weighed in on this and essentially did exactly what Jason had commented on earlier, which was recommended that the parties maintain the 11 holidays, but also that the union would have to take a concession with respect to how the employees are paid on the substitute holidays and the amount that they're paid when working those. So thank you for hearing me out.
Mr. O'Connor, this 11th day in dollars and cents, what's 11th day worth?
Probably has very low financial impact because in theory nobody's working on that day, or they're working if it is not a declared day. So the financial impact's very, very small.
For myself, I'm much more interested in the second issue, and of course I separated them. So here we're dealing with the 11th day, or 10 days or 11 days. We're not dealing with anything else. So let's further comment from the council.
Jason, I don't know if it was you or Steve, but the county, do they do 11?
I would have to refer to their contract. I know, in the way employers do it is they have, some of them give personal days as opposed to the holidays. I believe the county does not do the Martin Luther King holiday.
So it's 10? Okay.
Right.
School board, no idea, or?
School.
I could Google it.
Well, we're
That's what I'm
dealing with
doing.
a very large employer.
That's what he's doing.
I can tell you that the majority of the public sector employers, at least the ones that we represent, have 11. So, I can tell you that right now.
The reason I kind of go out and I ask this is that, we can kind of control the wages and the terms here within the city, but in reality, we are competing in a job market, and that is something that we cannot control. I'd hate to think that we're getting to the point where we are encouraging people to leave Vero Beach. That's as an employer. We've got an awful lot of good employees we'd like to keep, but on the other hand, we do have a budget that we have to stay within.
I would agree with your comments, Vice Mayor Kramer, and I would just like to add that, sometimes, government has to set the standard. Good Friday is an important holiday to be off, and if city employees aren't given that holiday off, then you may have a lot of other employers that start not giving that day off to their employees also, and then those employees can't go attend the services that they would like to attend on Good Friday. I'm sure most of you folks probably attend the Good Service Friday services, and then the employees that work at the city would like to do the same.
Mr. Kramer, to your point that we need to be competitive, but we also need to maintain our budget, seeing as how this has no financial impact from the city manager's comment, I make a motion that Good Friday stay as is.
I'll second it.
Mr. Roll,
I agree.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
No.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes. Okay, the second issue. In other words,
Did you want me to address it or?
Substitute holidays.
Okay.
We're talking.
The-
let's start from scratch. on
Okay,
it,
we'll start from
It's rather
scratch.
complicated.
Okay,
19A.
and let me describe it really as how we pay for holiday pay. So there are two forms to holiday pay. Okay, the first is what I'll just call generic holiday pay. So every employee would receive holiday pay. Let's just make that person an 8-hour employee just to make this easy. Okay, so each person will be paid 8 hours holiday pay for Good Friday. Okay, there are some employees that may be required to work on Good Friday. If you are required to work on Good Friday, then you are paid time and a half in addition for having to work on a holiday. And I think it's probably self-evident why we do that. That's if you're having to come out and work on Good Friday or work on Christmas Day, there needs to be some compensation for that or bonus for that for you doing that while other people are home with their families or whatnot. So that's what the city proposed to do. Under the existing agreement, the first part is the same, holiday pay for everybody, but the second part is not the same. For people who don't work or are off the day of the holiday, their next scheduled work day becomes their holiday, and that's where the term, the substitute holiday, kind of came from. So the city's proposal would eliminate that portion of it. So just to kind of summarize, it would be holiday pay for everybody, time and a half if you work the day of the holiday. That's the city's position, the city's proposal, and that's the proposal that the special magistrate recommended that the parties adopt.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes, Mayor. As the union, as I indicated at the beginning of the meeting, we could come in and cherry pick this thing, but we elected not to. This was part of what the special magistrate recommended, although it's not something that was something that we were wanting to agree to in negotiations. It's something we will concede to as part of the special magistrate's recommendation, so we would agree.
All right. Council comment?
If there's agreement, then I make a motion that we eliminate the substitute holiday pay.
Second.
All right, Mrs. Turner seconded. I'll call the motion, Mrs. Bach.
Mr. Rold?
I agree.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
Just to clarify on that, for Article 19, the council has adopted the city's proposal except for the elimination of Good Friday as a holiday. Is that correct?
That's my understanding
That's
of it.
correct.
Okay.
Mr. Odom?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The next article for your consideration is Article 20, which deals with wages. And the city's proposal on wages was that there would be no wage increase for fiscal year 2014-2015. The second component of the city's wage proposal would be the elimination of the longevity step plan. The third portion of the city's proposal is that wage increases would be addressed on an annual basis through a reopener clause in the bargaining agreement. And the fourth part of the city's position, which really addresses addresses both units, but that the call takers and customer service representative employees would stay on their current pay scale, would not be advanced on the pay scale. The special magistrate recommended that there be no wage increase for fiscal year 2014-15, which is the city's proposal. The special magistrate recommended that all employees move up to what level on the longevity pay plan they would be but for the plan being frozen. The special magistrate recommended that there be no wage increase for 2014-15, that there be a reopener clause in the contract to address future wage increases.
Mr. Meyer, I think what we'll do is go through the entire litany and then let's subdivide this one again, too. So, whatever you'd like to say, sir.
Again, Mayor, the union's original position with respect to the wages at the impasse and at the impasse hearing before the special magistrate was that we were our our demand at the bargaining table was for a 2% across the board increase, and that the employees who were not on the proper steps would move to the appropriate step. And then we have those positions in which Mr. Odom spoke about the dispatchers that are over at the police department, and we have some customer service representatives in customer service that have not been moving on the appropriate step that they're supposed to have moved to. So the special magistrate, which is the union's position before you today, did not agree with moving with a 2% across the board increase. What he recommended was that if other non-bargaining employees or city employees receive some type of increase, that there would be what they call the B2 clause, that we would receive the same increase if such increase was granted by the council, and that we would adopt some such language, and that the employees that were not on the appropriate longevity step and or step within their classification would then move to their appropriate step. And that's what the union's position is before you today, which is exactly what the special magistrate recommended.
Can the two of you agree on how we're going to subdivide this?
Well, I think probably a natural first point would be, will there be a wage increase for fiscal year 2014, 2015?
Well, is it appropriate for me to comment now, Mr. Comment?
If the parties are done.
Is that agreeable, Mr. Meyer?
Yes, sir.
We don't have the money in the budget. I think we have to look at further budgets for further years, but that's my opinion. Don't want to put the city spending more money than we have.
I understand, and that's one of the pieces of the process as we're moving forward with today, that in the special magistrate, even if you've kind of taken a look at his recommendation, which was what the union's position was at the hearing, and you can't just sometimes look at each individual item in a vacuum without considering the entire financial impact on the city for everything that we're at impasse on. Because if you did, adopting the special magistrate's recommendation in its entirety will save the city over $300,000 for fiscal year 2014, 2015. So our proposal, which is before you today, which is the same as what the special magistrate recommended, will actually save the city $300,000 more than what you've budgeted for fiscal year 2014-15. So the savings there are from what the city's proposals were with respect to moving to the defined contribution plan for all employees. So I just want to let you know that, and I don't mind those discussions taking place at the same time, if Mr. Odom doesn't, but those two things, have to be talked about in concert, I believe, as a financial impact. If you're saying, well, we don't have the money, well, adopting what the special magistrate recommended with respect to the pension, and if I can just touch on that, what the union has proposed doing is that employees would contribute an extra 1% towards the current pension, and go from 3.25% to 4.25%, and that all new employees that would come to the city would then be on the defined contribution plan instead of the defined benefit plan. So there would be, obviously some time before the complete transition, but that's how we believe, and I think even in kind of dissecting the special magistrate's decision, that's how he came to his recommendations, is something that he believed the parties could live with, because it is fully funded and it actually will save the city money. And Mayor, I know there's roads that need to be paved, and I'm sure you could probably figure out a way to spend $300,000. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Mr. O'Connor, what's our unfunded pension?
Oh, the unfunded pension's about $30 million, round numbers.
Mr. Turner, I'll turn it over to you, but since we were having a dialogue between Mr. Meyer and myself, I believe that it's mandatory that we get into a position where we deal with the pension, and I don't see how that is possible unless we change the system. So my prejudice on that. and you're spending $300,000. I'm looking at in 5 years, 10 years, I'll be gone, of course. But the reality is that we've got to plan for the long term, and I don't see the long term being sustainable in the city with this kind of $30 million, whatever the number is, unless we begin steps to be sure that it doesn't escalate. I've taken that position all along, so that's my position. Mrs. Turner. Sorry, I haven't interrupted you.
I was just trying to get back to the wages. I thought when we started talking about, we're trying, we were getting off the issue at hand. Within this article, we appear to have several things that said only that we've agreed to freeze wages, and we're not going to have a wage increase. Of course, we just had our negotiations circumvented and went back around from the negotiating team. It went back to the council that they received a 3% raise last February. So that's to be considered. In this agreement, when they say that if there was any other raises given within the city that the union would be given one, do we have any non-representative employees, Mr. O'Connor, that did not receive that 3% increase at the time the unions did, that we would need to be adjusting their salaries?
We had really 3 steps in the 3%, as you recall. We settled the police contract. We gave 3%. Next year came the Teamsters, and we settled that at 3%. And then the general, or the folks that were not in the bargaining union, i.e. management, got 3% the following year. So we did it in steps. Now, just to let you know, and I haven't talked to Jason about this because we did not have any conversation about the Me Too clause, I'm not real crazy about Me Too clauses because that sort of restricts future action as to if the council wants to do something for some type of rewards going forward. And Me Too clauses in my career have sort of got me into trouble. So I think the flexibility in having the 1-year opener, I agree with that. I think the annual wage opener is something that needs to be addressed. And as it goes forward, that the council has that opportunity, as well as the union, to make their presentation to the council for 1-year annual wage increases. The STEP program, and I know that this is one of the elements, but the STEP issue, you need to remember, it's been almost 6 years. We've had one pay increase, and that did not involve the STEP program. And the steps have almost become antiquated in the process, in the fact that they don't have any real relevance to what has taken place over the last 5 or 6 years. And if we start adjusting those, they could have major financial impacts. And I think that if we want to delve into the steps, we need to make sure that we give and allow Finance Department to do some real numbers on those.
Mr. O'Connor, you might explain for the public and probably for Mr. Old too, since he's only been here since November, how this STEP thing has or has not worked, as the case may be. Well, we'll let each of the representatives follow up with you.
I think the STEP program, when it was initially developed, worked in the fact that it was sort of a period of wage history that most every city and a lot of other employers took STEP programs, but it was sort of to, as I understand, reward those as time and grade and sort of the people who had more experience in the way that the steps were taken. And then you develop these steps. If you were here long enough, then you went from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, and then it sort of rewarded that.
Well, what does that mean?
Well, it meant that you placed and gave financial benefit for time with the organization. And Jason, is there anything that I've said that?
Just, the STEP plan, or the longevity STEP plan, has been frozen since, I believe, 2009. The city STEP plan, and it's, if anybody has a copy of their existing contract, it's in the Schedule A, but just to give you kind of a rough rundown on it, there's a start rate for each position. There's then a 6-month rate, and then a 3, 5, 7, 9, 10, 15, 20-year step. After 20, there's no further steps. 30 years at your stay at the 20 step. That's an automatic, once you hit the 5th year, you go to that rate, 7th year, and on. The wage increase is a different element to that. So what we're talking about really are 2 different things. One would be a general wage increase, to these hourly rates that are within the step. The second component is whether or not we eliminate the longevity step plan, which means there would be no more moving up from 3 to 5 to 7 to 9. It just would be, if there's a general wage increase, there's a wage increase to the hourly rate.
And historically speaking, whenever you did a 3% adjustment, you usually did it to each one of those steps as well.
Right.
I'm
sorry, go ahead. The last thing I would add would be we did cost out at the time we were getting close to the impasse hearing before the special magistrate about what the approximate cost for moving employees to the appropriate place on the step plan for Teamsters only employees, so I'm talking solely blue collar, clerical, and technical, would be approximately $112,000. And remember, that's then a continuing obligation going forward at those rates. So it's not a one-time pop. It's about 112 to 130, depending on if you're including Teamsters and non-bargaining employees.
Mr. Meyer, we've talked a lot, and I'll let you talk. You have the floor.
That's okay. Give me a little time to get my thoughts together. And I just want to deal with, the couple of the dispatchers and the customer service reps, because we sat here last year about this same time regarding wages, and it wasn't just the wage increase. We were talking about the step plan, and we were also talking about some of the other classifications that people weren't appropriately classified. And we sat there and talked about it. And I remember, Mayor, that you gave direction that, those are important issues. Those things need to be fixed. We need to work on that in the budget. And you know what? It never came up one time in the budget. Never once to how you're going to budget to fix those employees. Never came up once. These are important issues for us. The longevity step is we have employees that were hired on with the expectation and told this is where you're going to be. This is the movement within your step or within your classification, and there was an expectation that the city would live up to what they had told their employees, and that's all we're asking here. We've moved off our position of the 2% general wage increase. We're just asking you to adopt what the special magistrate has recommended. Obviously it's not something that we're going to run out and for us it's probably almost a break even if especially if you consider what we're doing with our proposal with respect to the pension of giving another 1% towards the pension. It's definitely not a windfall for us.
Well, I think your point that it should be looked at in a budget session is correct, and your historical point, to my memory, is correct. Comment by counsel.
I would say, as far as the STEP program, I object to it in concept. I guess if you have two people performing the same jobs at the same skill level, why should one be earning significantly more? And it's back to pay for performance and not just for longevity for being there. Maybe we do need to do something more with performance type, awards that could be done. But I am not in favor of continuing this outdated system.
All right. I guess we have to deal with each part of this. Jason, again, tell us the parts we're dealing with, please.
I think you can take them however the council wants to, but just one of them is going to be, is there going to be a wage increase for fiscal year 14-15? A second one would be whether the city's proposal to eliminate the longevity step plan will be adopted or not adopted. The reopener, and I would put third, then whether you're going to move the call taker customer service representatives up on their pay plan.
What's the implication of that? What does that mean, Mr. Meyer, too?
And again, these numbers were run in preparation for the impasse hearing, which was in November. And so the total approximate figure to move call takers, the communication officers, and senior communication officers plus October 17th was the day of the hearing, and the customer service representatives is approximately $52,000 to $55,000.
And that's up 2 steps?
It could be for one person. It could be one step for another person. It's really, I think Mr. Myers can jump in his turn if I'm off on that. But but it's people that are in, for example, call taker 1, but they're in the position, they're paid as a call taker 1, but they're in the position of call taker 2. So that person would go to the call taker 2 pay scale. Maybe you are just for example's sake, only customer service representative pay scale, but you are in the position of senior customer service representative. So it's not necessarily, I don't think, as simple as saying each person goes up one step, if that helps you. But the numbers we ran in probably 4 months ago, were approximately $52,000 to $55,000 to make that move for that classification of employees.
Why are they different than the other employees?
They're on a different pay scale, Mr. Mayor. They're not on the scale that I just articulated to you with the longevity step plan of start to 20 year.
They had a progression type system. For example, right now at the police dispatch, you have an employee who is moved. He came in as a call taker 1, moved up to the call taker 2 position, and then now is in the communication officer 2 position. And that employee is still making the same exact pay that a person that comes in as a call taker 1 is currently making, because the steps have been frozen for 5 years on that step. So he's doing the work, has the longevity and the time in which it was required to do that work, but yet you're only paying him the same as a call taker 1. And the same exact principle or applications going on in customer service. You have people that were hired on as a customer service rep. Now they've transitioned into senior customer service rep, but those employees are only being paid as customer service representatives. So, those were 2 distinct divisions in which it was a little bit separate than just the longevity step. But, look, at the end of the day, the union has to, our job, and I guess I should have probably mentioned it in my opening, is to try to reach some type of, bring something back to the bargaining units that we can have ratified, so we can have some type of agreement, so that we're not going back into negotiations next month. Because if we don't take something that is something that the employees believe is fair and equitable, then, and obviously by looking at what's being offered here, nobody's going to get a windfall here. If anything, it's barely break even. Then we're going right back into negotiations. What we need to do, in my opinion, is try to come up with, and that's why we, move forward with trying to accept the special magistrate's recommendations, because we believe we need to try to have something that we can get the bargaining units to ratify, so we can move forward. It'll give us labor peace and stability for through September 30th of 2016. And everybody will know what the terms and conditions are without having to go right back to the bargaining table, and that's kind of an important piece of this. And
is the step system used in many different places? Is it a normal thing to be using?
I mean, it depends on where you are, Mr. Earl, but I mean, step plans are used. It's predominantly, I don't know of any public sector, except for maybe a couple, that use step plans these days, but it's not an uncommon thing to see in the public sector.
Mr.
If I said public, I meant private.
Mr. Myers mentioned an interesting fact there. This agreement, if we would arrive at agreement with these terms, then our contract would be only good until 2016 and would be back at this. We would not have a 3-year from the time that we would reach an agreement. Is that correct?
Well, I'll let Mr. Myers speak for himself. But I think what he was, maybe I'll just let him speak for himself.
Well, I mean, look, the position with respect to the city and the union reached in negotiations on duration, and I would assume it was at your guidance, was to have a 2-year contract. So the city proposed it. We accepted the proposal. So, the duration would be through September 30th of 2016. That wasn't an issue that was an impasse between the parties.
It's just I'm just trying to understand, because the existing contract expired in 2013.
That's correct.
We have spent the last 2 years in negotiations, mediations.
Well, we had, what happened.
1 year remaining.
Well, when it went to impasse, it's then only good for the rest of that fiscal year. So I think what Mr. Myers is saying is that I think what his point is that if we can get an agreement that the union would accept and vote to approve, then we would have, I guess, what he referred to as labor peace and not be back at the bargaining table next month. If that does not happen, and the council's or that these articles plus the T8 articles are not approved by the unit, then only those articles that were imposed by council today would be imposed for the rest of this fiscal year, and then the status quo would be in place as to those other articles. So I think what he's saying, and I mean, I don't know that anybody would disagree, is that the goal is you want to have an agreement that everybody will sign off on so that you have an agreement as opposed to an imposed agreement, if you will. But I want to clarify a couple things on the longevity step plan and the call taker position. I think Mr. Myers is correct that that pay plan was frozen just like the one that we talked about before, the start 6 month through 20 year. So from the city's perspective, it would be unfair to unfreeze on one side those employees, I'm talking about the call takers, customer service reps, but not the other employees that are on the other step plan. A caveat, just in fairness, I think you have the issue of a call taker 1 doing the job of a call taker 2. So, there's some different equities in that. But what council really is deciding, the proposal was to eliminate the longevity plan, but based on what I'm hearing from council, if you vote to not move up folks on the longevity step plan, it does not mean that you have to also eliminate the longevity step plan. It could be something that you take up at a different time at a later date. So I'm just kind of picking up what's being said at the table here or at the dais, and so you do have to decide on whether there is a wage increase for fiscal year 14-15. You do have to decide whether or not you're going to move employees up or down, move employees up on a longevity step plan or keep them where they are. But that decision does not necessarily mean that you have to eliminate the longevity step plan, if that makes sense to you.
Could we, is it possible that as part of our budget discussion for 15-16, we could come forward with a fix for this, or is that impractical?
No, sir, it's not impractical. We can bring forward the cost of that.
But it might not be acceptable to Mr. Myers.
Look, to me, all you're doing is ensuring that we're going to be back in negotiations next month. But that's a decision that you guys have to make as a council. That's my opinion. I mean, the bargaining unit will have to vote on this, but
I believe that would, but that would be then a decision that would not take place in this fiscal year. So it would not be something that the council can impose for some later time period outside of the 14-15 fiscal year.
Here's my concern. We have this plan. We're not using it. It's been frozen. I believe it's also been frozen over at the police department.
Yes, I think the step plan throughout the whole organization.
Right.
Yes.
So we have this plan, and we're not using it. And we said we would do something about it, and on us, we did not.
Well, about the call takers,
right?
Not the other.
But so the problem with the wage increase right now, without addressing the step, is what the magistrate talked about. It's a growing disparity. So you're getting a 2%, but you're not at the level that maybe you should be getting it where someone else. So the disparity grows. So I would like to have a concrete plan that we actually use that has performance review or whatever else, but that you have a plan that works. I mean, there's no point in having something that's frozen and it's just creating inequity across the board between departments. We need to get a plan that we can use and we can utilize to reward, good work and loyalty to the city and all of the above. But I think we have to have a concrete date because we said we would and we didn't. I mean, here we are a year later.
The step plan is not going to. The step plan is automatic. So when you hit 2 years, you go to that pay. It's not based on.
But that's what I'm saying is what we need to come up with something that we can put in place that we will actually use because we're not using the step.
But the city, if I could. Councilmember Graves, the city knows exactly, and they've tracked exactly where each employee should be on the system. So when we say we have a broken system, no, the only thing that's broken is the employee's pay because they haven't received what they're supposed to be getting in their pay. Nothing else is broken, okay? The city knows exactly where each employee should be. They've tracked it. They know exactly what it should be. That number comes out, I think it was $112,000. Was the number to fix those. So I mean it's
Plus additional 50 for the call takers and customer service reps.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was 54, yes, ma'am.
I think, what we have to keep in mind is a process that we're in today, and the process we're in today is the legislative hearing to resolve the issue at impasse, and the only issue at impasse is, at least as to a wage increase, is 14-15.
Right.
If the council can certainly give direction for the parties in the next fiscal year to address the longevity step plan, and maybe that means that you do not accept the city's proposal to eliminate it today, which is what the city's proposal was to do. But you address whether or not you're going to today move employees up to where they should be on the step plan, but for the freeze back in 2009. But council, I do not believe, can say, we're not going to do that for fiscal year 14-15, but for 2015, we want you to put them 2 steps higher or where they should be. That's not within the city or the council's authority or jurisdiction, if you will, in this proceeding.
Right. And figuring out a fix to that is, like you're saying, beyond the scope of this meeting. But I believe if we eliminate it completely today, then it kind of falls away for us to have to replace it with something that we can actually use and agree upon. So
that may be true.
For me, I don't want it to become a forgotten issue, is why I would not want it eliminated today. So we're forced to deal with it head on.
So I would recommend. So my recommendation to you, then, Ms. Grateful, to the council would be then that you decide on the wage increase for 14-15. You then decide on whether you're going to move up employees on the step plan for 14-15 for this year and this agreement, and then decide whether or not you're going to eliminate the longevity plan. Obviously, I can hear what you're saying, and your vote would be not to eliminate that. But I think that's just needs to probably be easier for you to deal with whether you're going to move employees up first, and then have your discussion as to yay or nay on elimination of the.
Is 160,000 full year? I mean, are we able to do less than a year? Just curious. I mean, what does that imply?
If you did it on a go-forward basis, obviously we're 1/3 of the way through the year. So, I mean, obviously that number would drop down to probably 110.
I'd hate to venture a guess on that, but it's going to be less than what the number was when we calculated it back in October. But then it'd have to be budgeted going forward, because you're going to have to be aware that they're going to be at that step. So
if it were to pass today, I'm not suggesting it will. Don't take me wrong. It's a hypothetical question only. When would it go into effect?
I don't see it could possibly go into effect before probably February 1 or not.
Probably around March, somewhere between February and March.
Miss Lawson's in the back, and she's probably throwing darts, but I would say probably March 1 would probably be the earliest that something like that could be implemented. And I believe, I'm not wrong, we were here, it took a month when we did the 3% to implement that, if I'm not mistaken. So
That would be assuming that the union ratified the contract that
Well, no. It's not assuming that. If the council, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Vice Mayor, if whatever the council approves today, the vote on today, if the council voted to move all employees up to that level in the step plan, they would be but for the freeze. If that was your vote and that motion passed, all these disputed articles that before you that you've all voted on, plus the articles that the parties agreed upon, would go to the union to vote. If the union voted that down, voted the contract down, those articles that you voted on today would go into effect. The remaining articles would fall by the wayside, and the status quo would be in place, okay? So let's just take Article 6, for example, Mr. Kramer, just to make our example. Article 6 is not before you today, okay? So all these articles you voted on today would go into effect. So they would move up to where they go on the step plan. What you do with a wage increase would go into effect. What you do with retirement, all that would go into effect for the remainder of the fiscal year. The other articles would revert back to the status quo, what they were before.
So then the decisions that we make will go into effect irregardless of what the union says.
On these articles that are before you for impasse, the answer is yes.
Then I got to ask the question, what the heck are we doing here?
Because what we end up with is this is what the process is, but the difference is if we end up something that is what the employees believe is not a fair deal, then we immediately go back into negotiations, and all of the other tentative agreements fall by the wayside that the parties have, and everything's back in complete negotiation for all of the whatever
15, 16.
28 articles we have in the contract. We're right back in full negotiations for everything. So next month, as opposed to
And we restart from square one with the modifications.
everything, to start from square one. So you go back, and that's exactly what it took us a whole year to get to this point from where we were last year. So the difference is we try to come to an agreement so we have a ratified contract that takes us to a duration of certain, instead of having something that's rejected by the bar units and has us right back into the negotiation process next month, or the month after, however long it would take to.
Mr. Meyer, this is a hypothetical question. I don't necessarily favor it, but I am curious. What would happen if we were to pick a date other than March 1? I'll give you one just for the fun of it, August 1, just for the hell of it.
Well, I mean,
then resume it.
Well, I think that's within your power to do so. I mean, you could hypothetically pick April 1, and then you take whatever that $164,000 number, and it becomes $82,000 because it's April 1's halfway through the fiscal year. So, I mean.
But you'd still have to put that to a vote, right? No, you wouldn't for this year, but you would for further years.
We would put everything. What happens before us today, the decisions you make, along with all of our tentative agreements, go into a complete agreement, and we take all of those, all of that language before the bargaining units to vote on together. And then if the bargaining units reject the contracts, then we're right back in the negotiations, and we start the process, basically from square one. But if it's acceptable and the decisions you make today are acceptable to the bargaining unit, and it's something we can live with, or they can live with, then we have a full agreement, which would take us through September 30th of 2016.
Well, how would you?
Mr. Mayor, before you get off on the hypotheticals, an example of exactly what we're talking about took place last year, where the council said we were going to award a 3% pay increase, and the union voted on it and rejected the contract, but the 3% was set by council, so it automatically went into effect, and we started negotiating just a couple of months later. And so the same thing that happened last year if they rejected the contract. And you can't make anything on contingencies here. This is, you all make the final decision on the elements. So there's really no hypotheticals that would apply. You can't say we're going to make it, December the 1st and then try to take it back if something should happen between now and December the 1st. That it doesn't play like that.
Well, I think we should go back to each article then and vote. We probably have enough understanding, if that's satisfactory to the council. Any comment on that?
Still under wages. I think you're going to break that one up then into.
Yeah, I would make a motion there's going to be no wage increase.
And second that, I would offer the amendment that it's,
Go ahead and amend it.
No, just leave it like that. Thank you.
Mrs. Bach?
Mr. Old?
I'm for it.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes. All right, now the next thing we have, define it for me, Mr. O'Connor, I think.
Well, you've got about three elements of that. You've taken the number one. Number two is to address the wages on an annual basis through a reopener clause in the contracts.
And you're for that?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Bach?
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
No.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes. What's the next one?
Next one, Justin, you.
The next one, Mr. Mayor, would be whether you move the employees up on the longevity step plan to where they would be but for the freeze. The city's position is to not do that. The union's position is to do that. The special magistrate recommended to do that.
That's correct.
Discussion by council?
What amount of money are we talking about? I have no idea.
The amount of money to do.
If it was retroactive to October 1, it's $164,113, and you'd have to do the math on anything after that date. I mean, if it was halfway through the year, it would be $82,000, and maybe Jason wants to bring up the calculator, Cindy, and have her.
Just a reoccurring cost.
It's a reoccurring cost. I mean, you see what the figure is for the year, so going into 15, 16, you know that that's going to have to be accounted for. But obviously today forward or March 1 forward is going to be some number south of 160, precisely where I'd hate to venture a guess. Somewhere in the six figures, I would suspect, 100.
Yeah, and what the multiplier is for the future and the implications it will have on their pension as well, and what you have to set aside for pensions once you're doing a rate increase.
Mr. Meyer, I have a question. So the call takers and the customer service representatives are on a different progression scale to other employees, as you mentioned?
They are, and the customer service representatives are even on a different plan than the call takers and the dispatchers over in dispatch. I mean, the customer service representatives they only have, it's a three-step progression that they have. They come in as a trainee, they move to a customer service rep, and then they move to a senior customer service rep. So it's a three-step process. They have a few more steps as in dispatch. The difference is the call taker or the call takers don't receive any additional longevity on top of it. The customer service representatives do receive longevity, the ones that were here at least anyway.
And is there a greater disparity in the wages in this particular department than in the lack of movement of step in other departments? Or is this just a particular one that... It is greater. I mean, keep in mind the step system, each step is only separated by 15 cents per hour. So if somebody is, if somebody was supposed to go from step 15 to step 20 and it's been froze for 6 years now, maybe that person should, in that scenario, would move up from step 15 to step 20. They would go up 15 cents per hour. Is how much that would be the great windfall they would receive. So it's not like they're not going to move up much. I mean, but that's what it would be. Whereas you have some call takers that are you have some that are $1.63 behind where they should be. Okay.
Or $1.64.
I was just trying to understand, with the step plan being frozen across the board, what the particular reason was for, I mean, it's not the same, obviously, step plan, but why this department in particular?
It was in 2009, and I'm not sure if any of the council members were here then. That was something, and it's actually something the city and the union reached agreement on, and it was something that the city came forward and demonstrated a need financially that hey, we can't afford to do this, and we reached an agreement, and the bargaining unit ratified it to freeze those with the expectation, obviously, at least on our part, that those things would come back as soon as the city things turned around. So that's been coming up on 5.5, 6 years now, and we're still waiting on it to come back around. But I don't want you to. This longevity step isn't for all of the employees. Mm-hmm. We're not talking somebody making a ton of money. The example I just used, going from step 15 to step 20, and it's been froze for 6 years now. So that person would move up 15 cents per hour. Somebody else may move up 30 cents per hour. We're not talking about some large increases here.
Right, and I agree with you. My concern is, and back to what I was addressing a little earlier, is making sure that this kind of disparity is addressed across the board, yes, which requires us to address the step plan. And if we're not going to use that, are we going to replace it with something that we can all agree upon that has maybe different terms? So that's what I'm just trying to kind of figure out, is if we do this now and we move here, what about other people who need to move? And how would we move them?
And there's always you can always move and transition to some other type of system, but in doing so, knowing you've been under a certain system for whatever 15 years it's been now, then you're going to have all these inequities mm-hmm. Within a new system that you've created. I mean, this isn't a real complex system, and it's one that there are a lot of public sector employers that they word it different. They just call it longevity pay increases that they give, and just leave it at 5, 10, 15, and 20, or whatever they do it. There's a lot of counties that do it that way. I know think St. Lucie and Martin County, they both do that.
Okay.
Just as a clarification, you mentioned the 162. Is that inclusive of all of the
That's inclusive of the dispatch call takers that we talked about in dispatch. It's inclusive of the customer service representatives in customer service department, and it's inclusive of the moving each employee to the step that they're supposed to be on currently, based on the numbers that the finance department provided at the impasse hearing.
Ms. Turner, any comments? Mr. Old?
I'm just saying, I'm a strong proponent of pay for performance and not based on time.
Mr. Kramer, any suggestion?
Well, all I can say is this one is going to really depend on what happens on the last one, on 24.
We can table this and come back to it if you'd like.
I have no objection to doing that.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So we'll come back to the step after 24 is the proposal.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Okay, moving to Article 24. Article 24 is the retirement plan article, retirement benefit article. The city had put forth a proposal. That proposal was to freeze the defined. Currently, the city has a defined benefit plan. The council is familiar with that plan. The city's proposal was to freeze the defined benefit plan for all employees. Okay, to then require all employees to go onto a defined contribution plan, and then the city proposed a contribution rate for that defined contribution plan at 7% by the city, and 3% by existing employees, 5% for all new hire employees. Let me just give you some numbers on that. I know we've had shade meetings with council where we discussed these things in the past. But for the sake of this hearing, I think the council is aware that there's presently approximately a $36 or $37 million unfunded liability in the pension plan. It makes up approximately 26% of payroll. There is now, the city did an analysis as to what the average is amongst other cities across the state in terms of what their contribution rate was. So the 7% didn't come out of air. It's an approximate average of what city contribution rates were across the state. It's, some cities and municipalities obviously give more than 7, some give less than 7, but that was kind of the middle number. And how we got to the number of 3% for the employee contribution is that, based on the information we received from Mr. Joyner, our actuary, is that you would need approximately, if starting fresh, approximately 12% to equal the benefit that somebody would get in a defined benefit plan through the end of their employment. In our particular case, you have employees that have already been in the defined benefit plan for some period of time. They don't obviously lose that benefit. So they would have that benefit plus the benefit that would accumulate in the defined contribution plan going forward. So the 10%, well, not the 12%, you have to remember, if you're going to compare apples to apples, they keep the existing benefit that they have in a defined benefit plan. That's why you have 5%, or why we propose 5% for new hires, which the 7 plus 5 is 12. So based on information we received from the actuary, that's what it would take to have a comparable benefit between what you would get from the defined benefit plan versus what you would get out of the defined contribution plan. The special magistrate recommended a kind of a split the baby approach. His recommendation was to freeze the defined benefit plan, to keep the defined benefit plan for existing employees, but require a defined contribution plan for new hire employees. The union's position in response to that was to accept the special magistrate's position. So from the city's perspective, we took what we believe to be the message from council in terms of how to address the pension plan, and that's what drove the proposal that's before you today, which is to address this issue now, which is obviously, it's a very important issue to everybody involved. We recognize that. But this was the proposal that we came forward with based on the numbers that are available to us, the amount of the unfunded liability, the annual cost to the city, the percentage that it makes up of payroll for the city, and what the city's kind of direction is going to be going forward. So that's the proposal from the city, and we believe that the council should adopt it.
Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple key pieces to our position regarding the retirement, which is, I touched on it a little bit earlier, which is that the employees under the special magistrate's recommendation, and which is a position that the unions was going into the special magistrate process, was that the employees would contribute 1% more, which reduces the city's liability moving forward. There's no doubt about that. And if we did nothing, if you did nothing but freeze that account and transition all employees to the defined contribution plan, that does not eliminate any of the current liability that the city has with regard to the pension. That's a fact. The employees' 1% that they would contribute in addition to would be approximately $167,000 annually towards the pension, which would mean that the union's proposal regarding the retirement plan would save the city $597,000 for fiscal year 2014-15. And those are numbers that we got directly from the finance department. And that's true because the city had budgeted this year approximately $430,000 to transition into the defined contribution plan. So you have those $430,000, plus you have the $167,000 that the employees will contribute, for a total of $597,000 as a complete savings for fiscal year 2014-15 year budget. And look, that's all we can talk about right now is the 2014-15 year budget, and there's no doubt that that's what the savings would be to the city. And more importantly, the city actuary Rocky Joyner of the Siegel Company, when he made his presentation and his actuary evaluation to the General Employee Pension Plan on May 5th of 2014. And the minutes of the meeting reflect exactly this. Mr. Joyner stated that if no changes are made to the plan, it would be 75% funded within 5 years and could possibly be 100% funded within 13 years. Now, if no changes were made. Now, we're offering to put another 1% in. So everything that your actuary, Rocky Joyner, presented would actually be increased, and those numbers could be seen even sooner with no changes to the plan. And this is your professional actuary you hired. So, I mean, that's, and also keep in mind, and I know there wasn't any of the council members here in 2009 or 10 whenever we made these changes. But that was the year that the city came to us and said, we have to have pension reform. And we did. We accepted it. We moved all employees from a 2.25 multiplier to a 1.6 multiplier moving forward. We reduced the amount of early retirement penalty, or increase the amount of early retirement penalties employees would have when they retired earlier. All of those things were savings to the plan, which the plan needed. We recognized it, okay? But we've sacrificed, we made those changes, and we believe that pension reform has been done. We believe that the plan is on its way to recovery, and we believe that adopting both the union's position and the special magistrate's position with regard to this will bring forward a strong pension in the future.
Mr. Meyer, we'll continue our debate on this. You said that it would be fully funded in 13 years. Under state law, it has to be fully funded in state law. And I believe we're putting in $3.5 million
Five, Mr. Mayor.
Well, five, we're putting in about $1.5 million for current pension, or $1.4 million or something, and $3.6 million, I think,
Yes, toward the unfunded.
towards the unfunded.
Well, what I meant to say, and maybe I said it wrong, Mayor, is that it could possibly be 100% funded, okay, which is not required by state law, based on no changes, and that's what Mr. Joyner. Because look, you're just now starting to see the results of everything we did in 2010. Employees, I mean, it's a drastic reduction in the amount of pension that those employees are going to receive on a go-forward basis. And there's no doubt about that.
I would debate that with you, too. I would tell you the markets and the investments have gotten better in the last 2 years. And substantially, we're putting in $3.5 million a year catch-up. That's roughly right. That's not precisely right. I think it's 3.6.
But Mayor, those numbers don't change. If you stop the pension, those $3.5 million.
What changes is in 3, 4, 5, or 6 years, the city is in a more sustainable position with a defined contribution plan than it otherwise would be. And I see this thing getting away from us time and time and time again if we continue with the current system.
While I respect your position, sir, I just disagree.
We disagree. So I'll open it up to City Council.
I just want to say our current defined benefit plans based on a return of 7 3/4, I think, percent in the fund. In order for us to gain ground to keep getting this funded, not only do we have to reach that percentage as far as a return, we have to exceed it so that we can start catching up with this unfunded pension that we have. You know, if we could if I could read the stock market and say, yes, you know, we'll be there, we won't have any trouble, we'll be at 15% return, you know, for the next 3 years, hey. Yeah, but what we're doing with the defined benefit plan is you're imposing all the risk, all the uncertainty on the taxpayers. And what we need to do is determine what our obligation is in that year and to pay as we go and to quit building up this liability.
I agree with you.
I feel the same way.
Mr. Kramer?
Well, I would have to disagree on that. Putting a little extra money into it does get it paid off a little quicker. I really don't like the idea of spending $300,000 to incentivize our employees to leave. I know it happens. Your best employees leave, and you're left with employees that are not your best employees. And then all of a sudden we can't get our jobs done. I like the idea of ending the pension system as we know it. I like the magistrate's idea. I really would like to see this thing stop.
And Mayor, and our Vice Mayor, I appreciate you saying that, but again, the magistrate's position was exactly what ours was. We made the decision in bargaining that new hires would know this coming in, okay, that they would be in the defined contribution plan, they would not be in the defined benefit plan. But that's something they know coming in. It's not an expectation that they were told they were going to have. I mean, you're talking about something that's you're going to make a decision that's going to severely affect somebody's retirement because their retirement is based on their best 5 years. So if a guy's going to retire in 15 years, it's based on the amount of money they made for their best 5 years. It's not based, so that person goes to retire on the current amount they have, they're going to be making on their retirement not anything close to what the actuaries projected they would make at the time they retire. It's completely different. So all the sacrifice they made 6 years ago was all for naught.
Forgive me, I'm not disagreeing with
Right.
you. I mean, I like the magistrate's position in that the current employees keep their pension, the new employees get the 401ks.
Yes. It would come to an end. Eventually, there would be nothing but employees. Eventually, at the City of Vero Beach would only be in a 401k type system, defined contribution plan, as opposed to defined benefit plan. There would be an end to the defined benefit plan, but it wouldn't happen for the employees that are currently in it.
Well, the pension liability would still be there even if we just cut the whole thing.
That liability does not go away, sir. That's a fact.
Ms. Graves? You don't have to comment if you don't want.
No, I'm just trying to gather my thoughts. This is a very dramatic shift from what we had been doing, what people came here and put the time in under. My issue with the switch is that we aren't hitting a percentage in the defined contribution plan that hits the 12% that the actuary said would approximately be needed to equal out the benefits. So if you're going to switch a plan this dramatic, I think there has to be some leeway on that percentage. And if the employee is contributing 3%, the city should contribute somewhere around 8 or 9, because that puts us closer to the 12. I think that the city has to take some responsibility in saying, okay, if sustainability is what we want, we can't penalize everyone who's already here.
I'm not sure I understand your proposal, Ms. Graves.
I'm
going to say
saying that
the city came up with the defined contribution plan will be 12%, which they calculated that would be equivalent to the defined benefit plan. So I'm not sure what.
Well, if we're contributing 7 and the employee's contributing 3, 7 plus 3 equals 10. That's 2 away from 12.
Okay, but they have the existing portion of their other fund too, as well.
But I'm trying to acknowledge the fact that this is such a dramatic shift that shouldn't we work harder to be at the 12%?
Well, Mr. O'Connor, what is each 1% difference, up or down from 7?
1% is $167,000.
Out of general fund?
Out of the general fund would be, of that 167 is $60,000. The other 137 comes from enterprise funds.
Does that help you, Ms. Graves?
Well, so then for to go from 7% to 9%, we would need
3.
For the general fund would be 120,000.
For the general fund, 120, and then
That'd be 334. Or total 334.
If you went to 9, you'd want half. If you went 1%, you'd need half of that. I'm just helping you with the numbers, not.
Oh, I have them. We have 43,000.
I'm sorry.
No, we have
I
43,000 this year in the general fund in unappropriated surplus, which almost gets us to the 1% to move up to 8. Then if we acknowledge that this shift is incredibly, different than what we were previously doing, and we make room to get up to 9, then we have our current employees at 12% to get them to that number.
Ms. Stern? Mr. Old?
I understood that because of the benefit plan being in place and this new compensation being in place, it's equivalent to 12. Is that right?
that was the rationale.
It's equivalent to 12 for new employees. For existing employees, it's equivalent to 7 plus 5. And what Ms. Graves is talking about is that if you went from 7% the city's contribution to 8, it's 167. Did I listen right?
167,000 extra, 60 from the general.
And that would bring the employees put in 5, the city puts in.
We would stay at 7% for new hires, but for current employees, we could move to 8 or 9, which with their 3% contribution would put them at 11 or 12%.
So that would cost $160,000. Let's say you took it from current employees from 7 to 8. I don't know how you transition that out over time, though.
And if I could, may I?
I guess you wouldn't.
Mayor, can I make a comment?
Well, I'm under several of these, having retired several times. I think a fact of life is we have to get to a defined contribution. So I'm open to ideas of how we do that. But
and keep in mind, and whether it's 9%, as Ms. Graves have just at least talked about as a concept, next year and the year after, you guys are up for election every 2 years. We have a different council every year. Okay, so we get some people in here that maybe don't care as much about you as the city employees 2 years from now, and all of a sudden they're looking for, how can we save 4%, and we now go from 9% to 5%, or maybe we go 9% to 0%, and you're just making it so easy for somebody to just say we can't do this anymore. Which is why we changed our positions, why we moved, but new employees would know what to expect. The current employees would know what to expect. There's a cost savings this fiscal year. Look, and in 2016, if it didn't work, Mayor, if it didn't work in 2016, and we're not talking about a lifetime contract here, we're talking about a contract that's going to last another year and 3 quarters. It's not going to. It's not something that couldn't be renegotiated. But I would encourage you to, by adopting the union's position with respect to the retirement, it's going to save you money this fiscal year. It's going to save you money next fiscal year. You can do some of your other projects, some of your other plans. And you know what? In 2016, if it doesn't work, the numbers are going to show that it didn't work. But we have a commitment to you that we're going to contribute another 1% towards that plan, which is another $167,000 a year. That's clearly going to reduce the long-term liability, more so than if you just took the employees out. Because now the employees aren't contributing anything. They're currently contributing 3.25% towards the plan. And that would make them contributing 4.25% to the plan.
I think it's a circular argument. And what I really think is I don't think any city council will reduce the 7 or whatever the number is into the future. That's not the reality of politics. I don't think it'll happen. So I don't agree with you on it. And
I've watched it happen in employers up and down this state. I've watched employers go from doing 10% to 0 all in 1 year.
You haven't changed my mind.
I know. But I'm going to keep trying. It's not yours I'm trying to change.
All right. Does anyone want to make a motion? We have to resolve it one way or another.
I make a motion that we move to the city's proposal for the defined benefit plan to be frozen and to move to the existing to the DC proposal.
At what percentage?
At the 3% and 5%, 3% for existing employees and 5% for new.
And what part on the city?
Excuse me?
What part on the city? 7%, 8%?
Yeah, the 7%, the proposal that the city presented, as presented.
I'll second that, but I would point out that any motion can be amended. Seeing no comment, I'll call a motion.
Mr. Rold?
I agree.
Ms. Graves?
No.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
No.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
Passes 3-2.
All right, let's go back to 20.
Step
20, the one that was tabled pending Article 24, was on the longevity plan as to whether the council was going to accept or reject a special magistrate's recommendation to move all employees up to the step on the longevity plan that they would have been but for the freeze. So, and if you need those numbers again, it was the approximately $160,000, but again, that was based on in the past, so it's probably 100, 110, 100, somewhere in that ballpark range.
Yeah, for that annual year, but then once that's in place, that's, you look at a 5-year projection or what the implications are on the budget.
Well, it would be for council to have to address that in next fiscal year's
The way I would look at that is, the reality is over time we have to pay our good people reasonable salaries, and we're going to have to look at that in the years ahead, 15, 16, 17, 18, and so on, 16, 17, 17, 18. To some degree, it comes out of the wash. I'm having trouble with we have a system, we're not using it. We, in general, have resumed, whether it be the lifeguards or frozen pay, we resume what we froze. And I'm having trouble not doing that. I would suggest to you that we do that at the 6-month point and go on with life. That's open for discussion. I'm not making a proposal.
So again, I think we have a bad system, and then you're just going to go back and reinitiate it. I think, it needs to stay frozen until we can come up with some kind of, acceptable system that rewards those for performance, for skill, as well as for length, and loyalty.
That's certainly an argument, and one that has a degree of credence. I can't argue with it. It doesn't change my opinion, but you're not wrong.
You can have yours.
You're not wrong. Mr. Kramer?
Well, we passed a budget, and we just spent about $300,000-$400,000 on the retirement side. It's hard for me to justify spending more money on the wage side. That's why I kind of flip-flop those around. You kind of put us behind the ball here.
I'm sorry. Ms. Graves?
I just.
Mr. Old? No comment? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Ms. Turner?
I move we continue to freeze the step system.
But I thought we were voting on moving people. So your motion is to not move the.
Is to continue to freeze the step system, yes.
This may take us a couple times. I see no second. Is there another motion?
Well, let me just say this. If we've got an opener and we've got budget season coming up, aren't we just going to start talking about this in about another 3 or 4 months?
Correct.
So it's just really a moot point.
Correct.
I mean, it would probably, if we approve something, it would, by the time it got into action, we'd be talking about it again.
Correct.
Can we table the thing?
No. Quasi-judicial, we have to make a judgment, and we have to vote. Would you like to make your motion again, Mrs. Turner?
Make a motion that we continue to freeze the step system.
I'll second the motion, but I will make a motion to amend it.
And how would you like to amend it, Mr.
My amendment would be that we make a commitment to look into a permanent fix during the budget session.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have to vote on the amendment first. Mrs. Spock?
Mr. Old?
Agree.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes, now we have to vote on the motion.
Mr. Old?
Agreed.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
No.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
But I did like the amendment.
That's okay.
Mr. Mayor, since you have voted to try to come up with a plan for the next budget season, may we ask that the union sort of give us some concepts similar, I guess, to what we are negotiating in order to place that in the decision-making for the city council?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just did.
And we can take that if that's what you think.
Yeah, and I don't look, as far as this legislative hearing, I don't believe the vote you just took was a legal vote. You can't. But that's just my position on it.
Okay, before we break, though, I think there are two things. One, we need to address. One is the city's proposal, which was to eliminate the longevity step plan. I mean, obviously, if the council's consensus, they want that to be looked at next budget year. I think I know what that vote would look like. But I think for completeness purposes, I think there at least needs to be, the council at least needs to vote on that. Second is I think there needs to be a motion that's seconded that does not include some like precatory language, like I would like you to do this or look at this for next year, because that's not part of this fiscal year's process. That's not part of this fiscal year's budget. It's not part of what the council can impose for the end of this fiscal year. So on the vote to not move the employees up on the step plan, I think there needs to be a motion on that. If the council wants to ask that the parties look at something the next budget cycle, that can come up in the ordinary course in negotiations, but I don't believe it should be part of the vote as to that issue, because we're only dealing with this fiscal year.
Make your motion again.
So I think the motion would be
would be not to move up those
To accept the
employees.
city's
Accept the city's
position not to move employees up on the step plan.
Just one
Thank you.
question. Are you suggesting that we make the motion that you suggested in place of the one that we just did?
Well, I'm not an expert in parliamentary procedure, but I don't know how, maybe Mr. Commit needs to address that. But the first part of the motion, I think, was okay, which was whether or not you're going to accept the recommendation to move employees up or down or freeze it. The same thing. I think probably the right terminology would be to accept the city's position to not advance employees on the step plan. But the amendment that was added to it is something that's not necessarily binding. It's kind of what council, or this particular council, may want to see happen. But that's something that can be addressed through the negotiation process. I understand the spirit in which it was intended, so that would be my position on that. Mr. Commit would need to address as to whether you need to have a motion to vacate the one you voted on and then institute a new one or not. That I don't know.
I think you have 5 members agreeing on this thing. I think just by consensus.
I think it was clear what you did before, but I agree with Jason that perhaps you make a clear motion that you're agreeing with the city position not to move the employees up this fiscal year.
Mrs. Turner?
Make a motion that we accept the city's position not to move the employees up in the progression system this year.
Second.
Shouldn't we strike the other one first, or just a procedural question? I mean, it's on the.
No, it's a valid question.
I think, as Jason pointed out, I think the first part of your motion before really said the same thing, but it was the addition, which is certainly some action that you're planning to take anyway.
I think what he's
I don't
asking
think
is
it hurts
procedurally,
anything.
because they voted on that, are you required to rescind it or vacate it and then vote anew?
Why don't we just vote on it? I believe the staff knows what we want.
Okay, Mrs. Vach, you have a motion, and I seconded it from Mrs. Turner.
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes. Now, you had a second part that you wanted, Jason.
I think, yes, sir. For just housekeeping purposes, part of the proposal was to eliminate the set plan. I take from your statement that that's not what you desire to do, but I think we need to have a vote on that so we can close that part of the process.
I make a motion that we not eliminate the step plan.
I'll second it. Mrs. Vach?
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
No.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
I can just have a moment just to make sure that there aren't any unattended to items.
Mr. Meyer, do you have anything else you'd like to bring up?
No, I believe you covered it.
Thank you. Thank you for
I don't see
being here.
I don't see any additional items that were at impasse that the council has not voted on. Thank you.
Mr. O'Connor?
No, sir, I don't.
Mr. Comet?
Nothing else.
Then I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is that correct?
So moved.
Okay, so we're adjourned.